good morning, good night, depending on the time of day you're watching this. Because right now we're time traveling all over because it's 5 p.m., 11 a.m. for CB, 8 a.m. for Howard with us. So I hope you're watching this from all over the world. You're probably not, and you'll watch this later because you're lazy and you don't like to see this live, or, or it's too early for you. So thank you for being with us. First of all, Howard, how are you?
I'm just this side of fabulous, as noted earlier. How about you, David?
All good, all good. Waiting for to be vaccinated sooner or later. Hopefully sooner than later. And how are you, CB? How's things for you?
I'm good. Everything's peachy keen here in New York.
Mhm.
I got my second dose, so I'm vaccinated, and trying to return to life as normal, which is going to be hard. What is normal these days? But you know, uh, you know,
that is an
hanging out with
amazing
my cat,
question.
making comics.
That is an amazing question. What is normal these days? What is normal these days, Howard?
I think it's a matter of someone coming up with a tutorial to re-socialize us, because we've been so separated from each other for well over a year that learning how to be among people in real life is going to be a curve. I mean, I think it's going to be difficult. And I'm not being clever or funny here. I think it's deadly serious.
But
Yeah.
And I think David's point is right. We are not returning. We're going to be reinventing what normality is once we come back.
but do we really want to? I mean, do we really want to go back to the same thing we had before, or or we will adjust? For example, I mean, yesterday I was watching a show. It's a small show. It's like 10, 15 minutes every day, a daily show on TV, and they only give data. From the. It's not one of those news programs. When just they give opinion. It's just data after data, and they were saying, okay, important data that nobody's thinking about. Last year in Spain, there was about whatever number of flu cases. A lot. Like in Spain, this year we have 7 cases. 7 in a 47 million country. And you are like, okay, do we want to go back to that? Or we are going to adjust knowing that if we are careful in the winter, with the mask and all that, we can avoid a lot of infections, not only the COVID ones. And as you know it much better than I do, CB, the mask is something, that in Asia is much more useful than we do here. Do you think we should, as Western people, we should adjust, or we are all just going to say, fuck it, we're tired of this, let's just go back to where we were?
Well, I think you can be optimistic about the potential of adjusting to change, but I don't think that Western culture is available to that kind of change. I think Western culture simply assumes that personal identity transcends and overvalues communitarianism. And fuck the world, I got mine.
Hmm.
It's an unfortunate reality, but that's the culture in which we live. Every couple of years, someone tries to create a community-based organization that people can identify with.
Hmm.
But then a book comes along called Bowling Alone, which identifies the real aspect. It's certainly American culture. I can't speak for European culture, but I would embrace what you're talking about, David, in a heartbeat. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're just going to have to be more aware of this as we can start traveling again whenever things open up. Who knows? That's the thing that's been really difficult, I think, for so many of us like to travel and do conventions. Comics, we sit alone and make, comics, especially, Howard, this so well, as a freelancer. And the cons are those opportunities to be so social and get out there and see your colleagues and, enjoy and, meet the fans and talk about what we do. And we haven't been able to do that in 14 months now. And we were saying, we should. Technically, around this time, there'd be a number of cons. There would have been Chicago Comic-Con, C2E2. We might even be in Barcelona because the show, there. I would love to be. Barcelona's one of the places I want to go the most when we can start traveling again. But yeah, we're just going to have to see where it all takes us. And every country and every culture is going to be a little bit different in how they're going to be dealing with the tourists coming back.
And as far as we love conventions, we miss conventions. We all know that, Even if they told us 1 year ago, you miss conventions, we would probably say no, fuck no. I needed to rest. Now we all miss them because, it's like that thing that you don't know you miss until they take it away from you.
Yeah.
But do you think we're going to be able to adjust and not being extra careful when you go to a convention, or just keep the distance and ask people to keep the distance at least for a while?
Yeah,
I think enough
enough
disasters are going to take place that ultimately I think we'll be scared into taking care. I think that seems to be the likelihood. You know, missteps will lead us back to some kind of deeper version of reality. That's my scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you?
I've been talking to a few of the convention companies, you know, just about it, because they've been, you know, wanting to engage the publishers about what would bring us back and what's going to be safe. And, you know, they're talking about, you know, of course, screenings for everyone that goes in, which is the lines are going to be even longer, but it's a necessary precaution we're going to have to take. Plexiglass, how are we going to handle signings? The aisles, you know, they're saying they're not even going to sell weekend pass anymore. It's going to be day by day. Like, you can pick one day you're going to be able to go in, and who knows if all this is going to come to pass within the next, you know, 6 months when we get there finally in October. Yeah. But, you know, we're going to, it is going to be, there's going to be no new normal anymore. You know, like we were saying earlier, but we're going to, we as publishers, we as creators, we as fans are just all going to have to adjust to just, if we want to celebrate the medium that we love.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I booked for my first show for September, and it's a show that I've been to before, and I've been there twice before. And it's predominantly civilian show. I mean, it's a show that attracts that mom, dad, and the stroller looking for that souvenir to commemorate their movie-going experience, as opposed to the broader stroke family of enthusiasts. And I believe that population, that part of the population of shows, is going to vanish. I mean, over the past half decade, I can't say this for European shows, but in the States, it's been endemic. I mean, you're sitting at your table, and I would say that 3 out of the 5 people who pass you are people who have absolutely no idea of the material we do, but are looking for a Deadpool comic book because they like the movie. They've never seen a comic book. They don't really know they exist beyond the abstract. And I think that proportion of it, for example, the San Diego show. I mean, I haven't been to the San Diego show since 15 or 16, and I'll never go back because just fuck those people. But I was sitting at the Omni at 8 o'clock in the morning, looking out at the mosh pit, about to go into the rooms. This is on a Saturday, on Thursday or Friday in the morning, and I realized that, you know, out of the 160,000 people, there were maybe 35,000 serious enthusiasts. The rest are tourists looking for Mardi Gras. And the Mardi Gras guys are gone. That will have a profound impact on the convention's gate, but not on us. That's the weird equation involved.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But because by the end of the day, the fans are going to remain. But you mean that the general public is going to be more careful, at least for a while?
Look, I mean, I live in Ventura, California, which is about a 5-hour train ride north of San Diego. And you can, and over the years, I would go down to the show for 1 or 2 days at a time. And in the beginning, they were the only people on the show who were on the way to the show with me were a slew of a half a dozen Disney animators who all got on in Burbank. And then there were the schmucks on the way, you know, the Madras short shitheads on the way to Del Mar for the racetrack. And over the last 5 years of that experience, people started loading up in Van Nuys and in Sherman Oaks and in the Union Station, who were there as tourists, solely as tourists, because they'd seen an entourage, they'd see these morons dressed like idiots, and they presumed that was the function of the room. Our existence had become slowly, but just imminently, completely ghettoized. By the time I was there, Artist Alley felt like I was in La Jolla. You know, they'd moved us. You know, and again, but that's the nature of the beast, because comics are the flea on the tail that wags the dog. The dog is the movies. The tail is the conventions, and the fleas are the artists and the comics they make. That's really what it's at.
Since we're talking about shows real quick, I didn't plan this at all. I got vaccinated. First thing I did was go back and see my parents. I was in my old bedroom. I found something. It was from the first big Comic-Con my dad took me to when I was a kid. I got it framed this weekend. 4 signatures: George Perez, Marv Wolfman, Bob Layton, Denny Cohen. And actually here, I think there's a hidden signature. I think it's Jim Starlin. I can't really tell. But I just found this pinned to a wall in my parents' house. And I was like, what the? Oh, my God. I remember my dad, we got on the train, went into New York City. It was a whole big deal. I really didn't have anything. I didn't even think to bring comics. I didn't know what it was. I thought, oh, you go, they're going to give you stuff, or you buy, you know, things. And I didn't know what to do. Or all those people, I just had a piece of paper. Like, could you sign this?
How old were you?
I think this was in 83, so I probably would have been around 11, 12, depending. And we had those local, like, motel shows where the dealers would go in. And that's what I expected. Again, oh, it's just going to be 10-cent, boxes of comics you go through and this and that. And this was it. It was not at the Javits. It was at Pennsylvania Hotel.
The Statler Hilton, the Hotel Maurice for pimps.
Maybe. I think it was one of those, Fred Greenberg cons or something like that. And it was just mind blowing for me how big this was. Like, it opened my eyes to this is what comic is.
Are still doing shows there.
Yeah.
It's the hotel's coming down, by the way. I don't know if you've heard.
Oh, is it?
They're tearing it down.
Wow.
The Pennsylvania is finally coming down.
The Pennsylvania is finally coming. It was due but 20 years ago.
Oh, please.
let's be honest. You didn't even need to get in. It was just passing by and saying, "You're dead." you don't know it yet, but you're dead.
that hotel had the feeling of just literally hot and cold running syphilis.
Two things. First, to all of you, you know the title, but yeah, it's been a year. This is why these two guys are here. Crazy 1 year, 183 shows in a year, should be. And second, of course, you don't see Carlos here. He is going to try to come. He had a medical thing, not bad, don't worry about it, but had a doctor appointment to go to last minute. Probably he'll try to come in and
but he had to have his scarf surgically removed.
Yes, something that I'm not going to say what part of his body. Anyway, CB, do you remember what the first Howard comic that you read?
So I'm sorry, say again.
CB,
I don't know the first one. I clearly remember Black Kiss, reading that, and there was probably some earlier stuff. I mean, of course, Star Wars was an early exposure to Howard's work in art, but I couldn't put my finger on the exact one. So, but I remember the discussions we would have around a bunch of stuff, particularly the Black Kiss. Yep.
How you were going to hell, but in the meantime, what the fuck is comics, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you were reading it like this because you're like, oh wait, I shouldn't show this to too many people.
We really wanted to get a branded condom to go with the book, but it's not cost efficient,
Oh, but David too. Also, just real quick before we go, congratulations to you. Happy anniversary! It's a wonderful thing you've been doing for fans around the world with this. Exposing fans to comic creators and comic culture from different countries. It's been so diverse, and it's been great to see you grow. So, congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Nobody watches it. Nobody cares, but
Anniversary.
What? How
I'm great to be to have started this thing and to be back for the beginning of the new year.
Yeah, because you guys were kind enough to start it. You guys and Carlos, that's the first week. So, and that's something that I won't forget. That's the love. And also, what do you think is going to happen, from a creator perspective and from an editorial perspective, with the readership? You think that at least in Spain, we know the numbers have been really good. I mean, after the lockdowns and all that, we saw the numbers, and the numbers for comics have grown. The sales and all that. Do you think that trend is going to continue in the US? That the lockdowns have helped people, regain the habit of reading again? Are you as optimistic as I am, or you don't give a fuck?
I could go either way. You want to state your opinion first, Howard? Do you want me to jump in? Or?
I have no dog in this fight. I have no idea. I just don't know.
Yeah. So, just I can speak from our perspective, David, and just. We're thrilled with the numbers, but we wouldn't have expected to be. If you talked to me a year ago and said where comics going to be, and we did talk about it a little in that first episode, what the future of the industry is going to be, and you talked to me now, it would have been a completely different answer. I'm thrilled that print comics are still as strong, if not stronger, than they were. We have more books, over 100,000 copies now per month than we did in the past. The digital sales continue to grow as well, which is a positive thing. But what we're finding out is those are more, non-comic fans. Those are people who want to come. They watch the Disney Plus shows. They want more. They're coming in. They're subscribing to Marvel Unlimited or buying their books through Comixology. But that hasn't taken any sales away from the actual print comic communities. The comic stores, more people are going into comic shops too. So it's almost both mediums are seeing increases. If we see it continue, we hope so. You know, I don't see any end in sight. The comic industry as a whole, from everything that us, you know, and all the publishers across the industry are doing, I think it's a wonderful time to be in comics. There's so much amazing stuff out there. It's given different creators time to come and play in comics too. And we've seen some great results. The only thing we have to be worried about too, and we keep a constant eye on this, is the collector market has grown as well. And that means the speculator market has grown.
Yes.
And not just for comics, but also for comic book art. If you look at some of those prices that are coming through now on originals, and, you know, especially the slab CGC books, everything is record setting, record breaking. And we just have to be careful, like Bitcoin. You know, you're seeing that rise too. But we as publishers, and I know we're keeping constant eye on it with variant covers and what we're doing, just know that we can't, you know, create that bubble again that could possibly burst. We have to be very cautious of that, which is something we're doing. But yeah, I'm extremely positive about the future of where this is going in print and in digital.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing here. Not as much in digital, but, you know, Spain, the publishers, the moment they started telling me the numbers, and of course they were the same, really, really worried about what was going to happen. But the moment they started seeing the numbers, they were like, oh my God, this is not what you expected. And by the end of the year, everybody told me the numbers for the year have been better than the year before. So how is it for you? You know, Howard, you're now involved with Hey Kids Comics. You're working on the third one, I guess.
The second volume we finished the second volume in April last year, a year ago, and one of I mean, this, with all of the various adjustments of delivery systems, you know, even just thinking about how to deal with this. I've got a ton of work banked. I mean, I've got 6 issues of Hey Kids. I've got a 100-page graphic novel I did for Dark Horse, and I've got the final Times Squared book in the trilogy. All 3 are finished. They've been finished for months. Right now, I'm working on a new material for a new website. I'm doing a web comic, which will ultimately end up being in print. But the truth is, I've not stopped working, and you know, and what my workflow has been such since my wife and I don't take weekends to go to the movies and do the thing we do on weekends now. Our weekends now consist of half days of work and cooking. You know, we both, you know, been doing a lot of chef work. So I have absolutely no clue. I mean, I'm a niche market. I mean, I don't deal with the kind of numbers that CB does. I mean, the reality is I'm a marginal figure and a cult figure in the comic book business. I don't work for Marvel or DC, and I'm unemployable by both, with all due respect, CB. I can't get a fucking job from you guys to save my life. And I'm okay with this. I've reached the point where I'm just not that particularly interested in putting aside my personal feelings about material and just delivering skill set work. So I'm committed to working in the context of the work that I do. And that means, you know, crime fiction, historical stuff, some erotica. And the experience I'm having right now is, you know, I'm an old man, and I have, my skill sets are still pretty fluid, and there's only 1 or 2 other guys that I can think of off the top of my head of my generation who's still doing work that's not a parody of itself, and I intend to keep doing that. But the market I reach has nothing to do with the market that exists. That's a trickle down market from the movies, because what CB is talking about is both the enthusiast market and the civilian market, an aspect of the civilian market that I mentioned earlier. That's so not my world at all. It has nothing to do with me. You know, I made a series of choices many years ago that I would not attach myself, that I would not take the route that most of my colleagues had taken to achieve a fan base. And, you know, the price I paid is I'm the architect of whatever issue I have, so I hold no one responsible. But the reality is, it's given me both fluidity, freedom, and thirdly, a kind of near invisibility in the context of the mass market. You know, most people think there's an astonishing number of people who think I still live in New York or that I'm dead. So either way, it works out perfectly for me. That's it.
But we a part of what we started discussing, the numbers that CB said, what we noticed in Spain, and correct me if I'm wrong, CB, is that we got a lot of new civilian, as Howard called them, readers, right? It's not only the ones we have. We are recovering readers that we lost and getting new people within the spec, because people wants to read, and they go back to the habit of reading comics. Or some that never did it, they are starting now because of the pandemic. Are you seeing that too?
On our end, yes, yeah, we're definitely seeing that, and now it's just a matter of will we be able to retain those readers if and when things open up, when the weather gets nicer, when the movie theaters open up, like Howard said, when people start being able to find other distractions or other forms of entertainment or other things to do with their families now that they're not going to be as cooped up. And that's where we're going to have to just wait and see. Again, we have to be careful with keep an eye on the markets.
Yeah, and also the diversity that you were mentioning is I think, correct me again if I'm wrong. Don't you guys think we are in the most diverse market we have like ever? And that's a really good thing because we can literally reach any kind of reader we want. Be it if they're interested in something like what Howard does or Marvel Comics or other Image Comics, boom, whatever. It's a full diversity of titles and genders that we can reach more people. Do you think that?
I think so, and I'll let Howard answer. But he talked about the genres that he's been working in. We have what we and some of our folks do. Boom, IDW, Image, their catalogs just seem to be growing. And the one thing I've noticed, and I go to the shop every week just to do all my shopping, is there's an influx now of more European comics than I can ever imagine seeing translated into English from different companies across the board. Some companies that I think have been created just to bring that stuff in, and some creators who are doing it themselves. And that doesn't also include what's going on Kickstarter, which has been a different phenomena, altogether, especially over the last 12 months. So yeah, in terms of diversity, I don't think there's ever been a time where I've seen more comics from global creators translated into English and sold here in the States. From my perspective.
What do you think about that, Howard?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm because of the situation I'm in right now. My reading experience was always consisted of spending an hour at the gym on the bike, and then a reading before bedtime. And that the bike is gone. I'm not going to the gym, so I'm reading at night. So I'm reading less and listening more. So my comics consumption is much lighter. But I've been more experimental in that material. And more often than not disappointed by the experience. But again, I think the diversity that we're talking about is both a blessing and a curse, because to a profound extent, what you're getting is you have sorry, I'm being invaded here. On the one hand, you have a kind of a pandering diversity. Actually, in both cases, the diversity a lot of the diversity we're talking about is pandering to a base. I posted a piece on Substack about a month or so back about people on the right presuming that for some reason, because I was being despised by people on the left in a selective way, that I was not one of them. And I had a really comic evening of having a full court press done on me by these guys to come work for the Comicsgate folks. Fuck, jeez, yeah, wow, kidding? Have you read that stuff? And it became even more comic when it turned out that they not only they wanted me to illustrate to be collegially involved with a script written by this cat. And, do you know who I am? I mean, or at least who I think I am, for fuck's sake. But again, the limitations of diversity is also becoming relevant. I mean, as CB knows, I've been collecting European comics since the late 1960s when Gil Kane introduced me to Jean Giraud and Jean-Claude Messier. And even before that, I was fully aware of Maroto and Carlos Jimenez. And I was buying Carlos Jimenez's comics from a bodega when I was 15 and 16, Danny Futuro and Delta 99. So I've been hip to this shit forever. One of the great things is that when I knew where that guy was swiping from when I saw Sampaio and Munoz material coming up and showing up at DC Comics. I didn't have to be educated in that regard. I'm on a solid footing with the European material. I have less interest and less access to the Asian market because I'm just not that interested in the manga and anime stuff. It's the tropes and language of the material leaves me a bit cold. But I'm deeply into the South American stuff. I'm a huge fan of Binacional on so many levels. And of course, Attilio Micheluzzi. He's a constant source of Attention for me. One of the things about spending as much time as I have in Europe is meeting and and encountering the material.
Mhm.
I recently did an extended piece in celebration of an Italian series of basically boys' adventure books called Uomo d'Avventura from the late '70s and early '80s. That I'm really pleased about. I mean, it's one of the rare instances, for example, speaking of which, of Milo Manara, not doing his usual one-trick pony bullshit, but actually doing a pretty solid narrative. But again, it's 40 years ago. So I'm all in on that. But on the other hand, I'd still, this may sound perverse and nutty, I'd love someone to produce a comic book that spoke from a political perspective, which I hold in complete contempt, that was good. That would be an interesting thing for me to see. I haven't seen it yet. Where is the Leni Riefenstahl of right-wing comics? That's the question I've got. So who knows?
Humberto, hello, Humberto Ramos. Where's Pacheco? As I said before, he's had a last-minute doctor appointment. He is going to try to come at some point. We don't know if he's going to be able to. And he'll see his high boss, I guess. Is there any mangas that you can point at, Howard, that you've read and liked, or it's just not your thing and not a single one?
The closest I can say is Akira. I mean, Larry Hama showed up back at Continuity in the early '80s with copies under his arm like this that he bought at Kunikino-ya at Rockefeller Center, and we were flabbergasted. I mean, to a great extent, it caught and reflected aspects of like 100 years of science fiction illustration and comics design. The funniest thing about that was when about a year later we were at Continuity and Pepe Moreno had never seen it for some reason, and Pepe was looking at it suddenly and says, "This guy's got a system," Of course, the system was 20 guys. But it worked out okay. I find the work unengaging, in a way that and again, I'm open to extremely cartoon work. I mean, Mercier is certainly broadly cartoon. Mercier picks up on aspects of Jack Davis's stuff that continues to delight me. And again, among my favorite illustrators is a guy named Earl Oliver Hearst, who has never been identified as a realist. He's an extraordinary cartoonist. And I grew up on a cartoonier style. I can't do it, but I love it. But I just can't warm to the manga stuff. My granddaughters went through serious manga phases, and they mocked me for not sharing their enthusiasms. But they're little bitches, They're voting age now, so I can't say anything. They can do whatever they want.
And what about you, Sibi? Do you think that? Let me ask it this way: do you think manga has influenced more American comics, or other European or South American comics have influenced more American comics? What do you think has happened mostly?
I think it's the first part. It's the former there, David. I think that the influence that manga has had on not just style but on the creator base has been undeniable. It's just I've been working in and around the manga industry for a long time. From the years I spent in Japan to the time I was working at Central Park Media. And we all knew that was definitely where it was going to head. I remember Joe Quesada saying very early on, like, this is going to change the way that we just not only make comics, but the people who make comics. And we've seen it, and the early guys who were very into it, be it the Ed McGuinnesses and the Joe Madureiras and stuff. But now when you look at not just what we do in comics, but the way that graphic novels, and all different forms of young adult material or things are being produced by the Scholastics and the Abrams and the First Seconds. There's such a manga influence there too, and it really took the kind of, I'm going to be stereotypical when I say this, but the idea that the comic creator was a white male. Who was telling stories, either fantasies or gritty stories or war stories, mystery comics. moved us away from that, and it shows that comic creators can be anybody, you know. And it wasn't solely manga's influence that did that. Don't get me wrong, but manga had a really big influence, especially on the female creator base. There were so many women who got into comics through manga and then moved into Marvel and independent storytelling, started telling their own stories. And you might not be able to tell it from the artwork, but you can tell it from the storytelling or the choices that they make or the kind of comics that they're creating. And European comics definitely have had an influence, especially more so recently, I think, with more international creators. As you know, we've been doing this for 20 years, you know, bringing international creators in, you know, to American comics, but also that the influences now of some of the guys that, you know, Howard just mentioned from Europe, but also a lot of the influence from the Brazilian creators now, and, you know, the influx of Mexican creators who took an influence from their previous generations of artists. It's I mean, it's the passage of time, of course, but, you know, it has been just fascinating to watch it and to be a part of.
And it's also a matter, I guess, that it was much easier to find manga comics in the US for a big amount of years than it was to find European comics, right?
Yeah. And, you know, I do think that also manga was much more prevalent in Europe, you know, before it hit the States. I mean, I remember when I was traveling around Europe, seeing my relatives when I was a kid, you know, in my, you know, very early on, that I would see anime more on TV when I would be over there, dubbed in French or Italian or Swedish, depending on what country I was in, but also going to the shops. And I was getting Marvel comics in the summers in Strange and, you know, different formats that were coming out as we traveled. But there was also more manga on the stands then too that I would never see in the States, that I never saw in the States until I was probably in high school.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to think that manga influenced Spanish or European creators in general before they did influence American creators, because we saw it earlier. And then you got the European creators there that had already been influenced by manga when you guys were starting to catch on manga. So it's a really weird circle, right? So look, we have a question here. The rest is everybody saying congratulations, blah blah blah. Thank you, everybody. But this is not about me, so let's move on. Victor Rakiu says one question. I'm going to ask this to Howard. It's a question for CB, but, you know, let me ask this to Howard. One question: is there any advice you have for aspiring artists, and what does a good portfolio have to need to have? Thank you very much.
So when I do a portfolio review, my first question is, do you really care what I think? And do you feel that you can actually compete with the middle level of the audience of the material that you're looking to go for? The next question is, whose career do you want to steal and destroy? And the third question is, do you understand the concept of visual narrative? And it's a serious question, because I have an assistant who has been with me for 5 years, and when he first came to work for me, he clearly had been told by everybody who knew him that his work was just lovely, and his work was terrible. It was as bad as mine was when I went to work with Gil Kane. And what it demonstrated was that he had a vague understanding of the fact that a comic book was a series of squares and rectangles on them, but he had no concept that there was a pattern, there was an organization, and there was a reason why those panels were arranged in the way they were. For the most part, what you need to have is a logic and understanding attached to what the pictures mean. Comic book artists are not illustrators. We are graphic designers in the service of narrative. Our job is to produce pictures that have narrative value. And anecdotally, I've told this story more than once. Some years back, I was on a panel with two guys who had just done a book, and the trade paperback had just come out. And the concept sounded really interesting. I bought the trade, and I read it on the way home on the plane. And in 5 issues, the pages had no distinctive idea of order. I had no idea one panel was supposed to lead to a next. The characters never acted. They never performed in ways physically that demonstrated that they had feelings the way we do in real life. And most significantly, in 5 issues, there wasn't a single headshot in which the character in the book identified objectively with the reader. There were 6 people involved in a comic book page. There's an editor, there's a writer, there's an artist, there's a colorer, there's a colorist, there's a letterer, and there's a reader. The reader is the engine that turns the material. And that if you think you can get by drawing beautifully in comics, Your career will be deeply limited to those who think you draw beautifully. Your job is to collaborate with a writer, whether you're writing it yourself or whether a writer is working with you in collaboration, to convey a visual experience based on a template of narrative provided to you by the writer.
Mm-hmm.
Long answer to a short question, but that's the reality. I've looked at stuff that was so much better drawn than much of the work that's in print, but had no narrative dialectic. It had no structure to it. Whereas I've looked at guys whose work was crude, but had structure and had reason. This assistant of mine, in 5 years, his drawing has improved incrementally. Not great, but he can put a page together now like a motherfucker. I mean, I'm serious. He can really make a page that makes sense. Years ago, when I worked for Gil Kane, Gil would hire guys to do his layouts. Why, I had no idea, because he was a really good layout man unto himself. There was a guy he had working for him who's vanished into the ether named Hudson Armstrong. I've never heard from him again. No idea where he is, whether he ever did anything. And Armstrong was a terrible draftsman, but he could put a page together like nobody's business. He really could. And that's what it's about. That's what I look for. You know, I mean, my experience is I look at a guy and I say, if I can get you to do better work for me than you're doing for yourself, that's the highest compliment I can give you right now.
Mm-hmm. My advice would can't top what Howard just said, because he said it so masterfully. But you know, my advice too is when I go to conventions, no matter where I am in the world, and looking at portfolios, it's always the storytelling. People talk about their style and their influence, and I can pick all those out very easily, but it's the storytelling that matters. And you know, people always say, especially when I'm at shows in Europe or in South America, oh, I'm sorry it's not in English. And I said, you know what? I'm glad it's not in English, because as a storyteller, if you're doing your job, I should be able to follow the story not knowing what is in those balloons. I should be able to have an understanding of it. That's what I'm looking for. And that's what I think that people fail to see. Like Howard said, they're so intent on the detail. They want to draw beautifully. They lack the fact that they're supposed to be telling stories.
From my side, I can only say one thing. When I ask artists, for example, Manuel Garcia, who's here, he knows. When I ask them for samples, they ask me for scripts, and I always say, no script. I gotta be able to understand everything that's on these 3 pages without a script. You are not going to get the safety net. We'll get to the scripts later, but first, show me you can tell a story, because that's your job. It's not to do pretty pictures. Well, that is also their job, but your main job is to tell a story. If you're not to tell a story, then we start talking about the rest. But if you can't tell a story, this is comics. And comics, your work is to tell a story. That's simple as that. But when Manuel Garcia says, what a 3, I could tell my history in comics that naming these 3 guys. Thanks a lot to all of you 3 for everything. And let me see. Felipe Real tells you, Howard, I agree with Howard. I struggle with manga, but I found Manga Masters of the Art by Timothy Lehman. It has some fantastic artists and showed me that it was not all cartoon work. Who else?
It's not the cartooniness of it. It's the language and the structure of how it tells the story that's the issue. I'm not talking about the drawing.
Yeah.
You know, it has a very, very idiosyncratic approach to narrative that I find it's so separate from the way I think of how a story tells itself that I'm not engaged enough to become part of it.
Maybe it's about some people tell me they can't read comics, you know, but I've compared people, you know, in the same case, put them in front of a manga and then, you know, American or European comic book. Depending on the people, they react completely different. You know, there's people that the moment they have a manga in front of them, boom, they explode. I can get this, but they don't get the others. The other way around, you put the manga in front of them, and they don't. You know, it's like the pacing and the structure for them it makes no sense, and not because you really, you know, the Eastern way. No, just because they can't get it. And then they read the American way, or you know, European or American comics, and they totally get it. It's that
David LaPuente has absorbed much of the manga technique and has managed to make it has inserted it accessibly into a more westernized concept, and it succeeds. What's the name of that guy? The guy from New England, Andrew. Who's an American guy who draws in a manga style. Andrew with an H. He did some work for Marvel. He did you know. but again, he has also applied a drawing style that uses manga, but in a narrative, in a structural narrative that I find more accessible and more successful for me in terms of grasp and understanding.
Have you noticed that too, this CB, that depending on who you talk to, they can grasp the language of comics better in manga or American or the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to individual taste, really, you know, and just I think it also depends on age, as weird as that sounds.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, I hate to sound old, but I used to absorb manga, and in English and in Japanese, when I was growing up, when I was living in Japan, when I came back. But now, and it's not just because I work at Marvel, because I've been at Marvel for on and off for 20 years now. I try to pick up some new manga, like my nephew, like I said, it's grandkids and nephews and nieces. My nephew will be into something, and I'll try to pick it up, or I'll hear from a friend's kid, oh, you should be reading. Have you read this? Or and I was like, no, I haven't. I try to read it, I just don't get it anymore. I should, and I understand the format. I know, I might even know the creator, but it just doesn't appeal to me as much anymore. And and I hate to think that it's because of my age, but maybe it is, because taste changes as well as we get older. So, or manga has evolved in a way that you feel separate because you didn't continue reading it so regularly, right? Yeah, but there's other manga that are super popular now that I've tried and I've loved, and I just recently started Demon Slayer, and I picked up the first 6 volumes and I read them in the course of like 2 or 3 days because I just loved it. I absorbed it, and it's just such an engaging story, and it's told in an original format. And even the artist admits, like, I'm not the best storyteller. I'm just going out. I love that in manga when the artists tell little stories and apologize to fans because they're still learning, and they thank their editors and stuff. And I've been able to watch the development of this guy because I've just been absorbing it through all the volumes that have come out, and how he's gotten better through the guidance he's gotten from fellow creators or from his editors. And that's just, fascinating as well. But it's the words that he puts that he's using really help tell the story and complement the art in some of the places where it does fall down. So it just, and maybe I see that as also a learning experience, or, something that as an editor I have a keener eye for now. So I'm looking at it in a different way.
Absolutely. Howard, if I ask you comics storytelling, what is it for you? Rock and roll, jazz, or opera?
I think it's all three. I mean, it has to be all three in real terms. I mean, somebody posted, some opportunistic little shit stain just posted an assault, pissing all over Will Eisner. Okay, comparing, and I personally loathed Will Eisner on a personal level. I thought he was a loathsome person. He hated me, I hated him. But the reality is, Eisner invented the language of comics. He was the one who broke the code to take what a Sunday newspaper page looked like in 1934 and translate it to the aspect ratio of a comic book page. Until Harvey Kurtzman comes along, everybody in comics is doing a variation on the theme of Will Eisner. You can't take that away from him. There's no way. But so what Eisner was doing was romantic melodrama with a strong influence of the movies and radio. Kurtzman comes along and introduces a newspaper's detachment, And when Jack and Stan get together in the 60s, the expediency and necessity of turning out more material than either of them were prepared to do seemed to create an idea that eliminated the kind of movement that was part of Eisner's stuff, the kind of detached observation of Kurtzman's, to replace it with impact. The irony of that, of course, is that Jack starts his career as an in-betweener on the Popeye cartoons, and the in-betweening nature of Jack's stuff vanishes within a couple of years of his experience at Marvel. So for me, if I'm doing a book, the Times Squared is an extremely jazz-oriented book because I'm looking at the concept of repetition through and internal composition, while the other stuff I'm doing is very operatic. I mean, my primary skill set is not in superhero comics, and people tend to think of superhero comics as opera. But they're really not anymore, because what's happened is the comics, the writing of superhero comics has been conquered by people with a certain overweening self-regard for the sound of their own voices. And there's a profound tendency in most writing of superhero comic books today to spend a great deal of time for superheroes to talk about how the superhero-ness of their lives is a tragedy that they must overcome and not succumb to. I mean, we work in a business which reveres Stan Lee, but we also forget how much of what we have today, for good or evil, derives from what's his name, Chris Claremont did with John Byrne and the X-Men in the '80s. We now live in a world where that is the language of mainstream superhero comics. That level of self-pity, the level of identifying the tragic responsibility of the material. That's where the opera comes in. Okay. So all three in every way, shape, and form. And let us not forget, for me, the fourth, which is the ballad. I'm a great believer in the ballad form in comics. I use it a lot. To repetition and recreation. You know, one of the things I teach when I teach is a Kurtzman job called Rubble, about a Korean family building a house, which is an absolute perfect metaphor for narrative structure and repetition.
But there's also the part of, just so you know, when I asked the Brits about this, they all to a T, they all answer, it's not either of them, it's punk.
They're just old men chasing their boyhood.
So, Sivi, do you agree that
Yeah, it's
Marvel Comics was opera and now it's not anymore?
No, you know, what I was going to bring up, and it's completely different because they're writing me a jazz. One of the things I've been enjoying is over this is going back and finding these old issues of Amazing Heroes, and these kind of both, given what Howard just said, speak to both. This is a full-length, amazing interview with Bill Sienkiewicz from '84, and just about him coming up and what he was doing, and he talks strictly about how his style is based on jazz and the shorthands and everything he uses, and it was just fascinating to read his interpretation of jazz and working with Claremont. And then right after I read the 10 years of Chris Claremont on X-Men interview, again, massive interview where he talks about every artist that he worked with, from the start through, and uses different language and different musical metaphors for each of the artists in this. Talking about almost like the ballad and the operatic and things. So just Howard said everything perfectly, and just totally, it's like he'd read those interviews at the same, but pulled all the information out of that. So,
but what do you think? Is Marvel's storytelling is opera, or is a little bit of everything?
It's a little bit of everything. And right now I think we have a little bit of both. We try to keep everything a little bit more operatic. It's all connected. It's this massive tale. It's got its tragedies and its love stories and the deaths and the rebirths and everything. But for some titles now, and given how some of the creators are approaching the storytelling, it's almost become pop in a way. It's very in your face, it's very bold, it's very in and out. They're not really thinking about the long-term story. They're thinking some creators, and especially some creators who pitch us and don't understand what Marvel is just yet, come in and want to make a splash, want to make the biggest impact possible, want to think about their Twitter followers more than they're thinking about the longevity of the stories in their careers.
Yeah.
At the moment, and some of it has substance. So don't get me wrong. Some of these stories are phenomenal that are coming out, that are being told in different ways. But we just have to be very aware of that, and it's also our job as publishers, as editors, as creators, to know what's going on in the market, and feed into it at some points if we're doing it correctly and properly and for the right reasons, and it's adding to the tapestry of the 80-year history of what we've done. But also know when things are maybe being done, or creators are doing things for the wrong reasons, who want to come in and have different ideas about the characters than we do. So
yeah, there's also, you just mentioned something that I think is a huge risk is happening right now, which is a lot of creators or potential creators being slaves to their Twitter or Instagram numbers, caring more about how big their numbers, thinking that's going to translate into readers when it's not. Or risking, the quality of the stories, to cater to their followers on those social networks. Are you feeling that? Are you seeing that risk too, in terms of creators and the social networks?
Yeah, and again, I don't want to. It's not a blanket thing, but there are creators who worry too much about what their Twitter followers think of the comics, and write stories or want to change stories or plot lines midway based on what the reaction to the stories is. So saying an issue will come out of a certain comic, part 1 or part 2 of a 5-issue arc, and then they'll get the feedback before they finish the script issue 5. Oh, we got to change all this. And my fans didn't like this. Or hey, I took a misstep with this character because this super fan online of this minor character said that I didn't handle him properly. So I'd like to rewrite what they do. And it's like, no, things change. You know, that's the thing. And you're not writing comics for the internet. Yes. Internet opinions are important. And yes, those Twitter followers or people on Instagram are buying comics. But the feedback doesn't have to be instantaneous. You don't have to adjust your stories. That never happened in the past. You never had feedback for your comics until well after they came out or the letters pages were done. Well after the scripts were in is when you got. There's no need to adjust solely because of the internet. Yes, there's some important feedback that comes through the internet, comes through social media. It's great to have that kind of instant gratification and or the opposite side of it. But it's not something that readers or that creators especially need to adhere to and think that those words are law, because too many do.
We need to keep some distance from the fans, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, but we need to do that, right, Howard? Let's keep the distance.
I've told this story in a pre-internet age. I was on a panel at a comic book convention, and this cat in the audience raised his hands and he expressed dismay at the existence of miniseries because he felt there was no opportunity to participate and offer suggestions that how the material could end itself. And I was completely taken aback. I had no idea that the process in which I worked had become democratized. And I fuck that. No, it's not that way. And I've been over the past couple of weeks, I've been I've experienced a number of precisely what CB is talking about. And the cowardice of many of my colleagues enfolding underneath these people is embarrassing to me. It demonstrates a sea change in character, and it also demonstrates the fact that if you are willing to accommodate your working creative vision, whether it's brilliant or not, to serve an audience that feels it as that it owns a part of you, that proprietary fandom does exist, then I think you've surrendered to an aspect of the material that perhaps you want to rethink next time you actually express an opinion that you think has merit or value. You obviate your value when you subsume your initial impulses in the name of someone who feels that their feelings reflect an inviolable absolute. That's just bullshit.
And if you fall for that democracy, then that audience believes they're always going to win, and then they become toxic, and that's and then you get Star Wars, where they have to dictate what happens in the movie at every second, and if it doesn't happen, that's a bad movie because it's not exactly what they had in mind. So
I never thought Elvis was so lucky to die as young as he did, but he really lucked out, because he would have been as archetypal a victim of this sort of toxic fandom as comics and other popular cultures are. I believe Elvis's death made Star Wars as a religion possible, because Elvis seemed to be the most Jesus figure that we had around back then, and that the desperate need for a secular religion was filled by Star Wars. And I'm serious. I mean, I'm not being facetious here. These people have a relationship to Star Wars that is akin to the dealing with the disciples. And getting a life would be a really interesting and intriguing experience. Extant and separate from performative morality. From attaching yourself to a point of view that gets you likes. I don't need likes. I'm perfectly. If my self-esteem depended on the approval of others, I'd kill myself. Fuck them.
I think one of the things with the internet too, David, and this is going back, is that there's this misconception that when people start creating comics, they stop being fans. And I always try to make sure that people don't realize that the people who are making comics are just as big of fans as the people who are reading them, and they're reading everybody else's comics. And that's what I think I always remind the people that I work with, the editorial staff or the creators, like, don't forget the fan inside you. We're fans. Make comics as much for yourself as you're making them for other people. And if you're at a crisis, don't forget to turn to that fan inside you. What did you like in comics when you were growing up that you can inject into your stories? And how do you take that to the next level? Look to yourself. Write a comic that you want to read as much as you're writing it for anyone else.
Mm-hmm. But there's also a part of that I'm guessing that the younger creators are easier, between brackets, to fall for that trap. To fall, there's like they see the fans reading the stuff, having an opinion. They are not strong enough in a way. They don't have a long career where they can say, you know what, screw it. So I guess it's also a matter of being too young and not able to react. And that's where it's good to have some other creator or an editor telling exactly what you said. It's like, no, we are not going to change it because some fans said that. And as Howard said, this is not a democracy. This is not how it works, right? Creation.
I take everything personally. I'm in a position now where I have to, and I listen to the bad as much as I listen to the good. But I have to take those comments for what it's worth, because opinions are personal, and certain people, there's different opinions about everything. I go to the comic shop every Friday. I sit there and I spend my hour there, and I talk to the staff. I talk to some fans who come in, just ask questions and stuff. And the opinions every Friday are so varying about movies and comics and manga and everything that's where I find it's calming for me to be there, because I just remember that's what's so beautiful about comics. Just as there's so much diversity in story and in storytelling and in art as we have now, there's just as many diversity as opinion. And it's those diversity of opinions, those conflicting opinions, the typical comic book guy from The Simpsons who will argue with people, that's as a bunch of jokes it's become, it really does help drive comics. I've read comics that I wouldn't have read, that I didn't think I would like, because someone told me, oh, you should read this, you're going to like it. Or I've heard some bad criticism about it. I was like, I have to read this for myself. And if it ended up enjoying it after so many other people have slammed it. So I have opinions like everyone else. And, they're not always right, but, that's what makes this world of what we do so much more fun.
Mm-hmm. Howard?
I still feel that, I respond to suggestions from people whose taste I respect. For example, I just recently read the first of 3 graphic novels by one of the guiding lights of comics, not mainstream comics, but separate. And I was nonplussed. I was flabbergasted by how utterly unappealing and uninteresting the work was. That it supported my feeling that it needed an editor, an art director, and someone to sort of form and structure the material. Mm-hmm. I can't take seriously. Anecdotally, years ago, I did my first interview on the internet, and I made the mistake of reading the comments, and my feelings were really hurt. It was like, they were all anonymous. They were just a bunch of screaming twatitudes, just like, get the fuck out. And I told my wife. Now, David knows my wife. My wife is a fairly sanguine woman, and she said, "You never listen to me. Why do you listen to these assholes?" And she, I had that dog sarcasm. And from that point on, I have made it a point to read nothing about me, positive or negative. Being neutral to criticism in comics is a very healthy choice. It's like those after-school specials, a healthy lifestyle choice. I just made one. And, so basically I'm indifferent to flattery, and I'm indifferent to praise, to hostile attacks, because they're more often than not, once you examine where the criticism is coming from, you learn more about the critic than you do about the criticism. More often than not, there's an agenda attached. Years ago, in the early 90s, I did a book in which a character told an utterly reprehensible joke to convey how reprehensible this character was. And the first review I read of the book was I was taken to task for telling the joke. I did not tell the joke. I put the words in the mouth of a character that I wish you to understand is reprehensible. But this guy had an agenda. And that agenda always accompanies, Mm-hmm. It's an impossible thing to avoid, and we are afflicted by this. It's when a career is built on selling entirely to the base that my suspicions are roused. Mm-hmm. And I have no interest whatsoever in creating a lockstep fan base by pandering and patronizing to an audience. It's just, I I have limited respect for someone who's that easily bamboozled.
Yeah, and they don't last long, and I don't. Those creators don't really last, right? To me, if you don't find your own personality as a creator, aside of the opinions from the mass, the social networks, you don't last in this industry, right? You need to have become how do you call it? Become tougher to criticism.
Yeah, it's true. But that aside, and I want to bring it back to the conventions for a second. It's interesting because I do think that we forget that how much positivity there is in this industry, how much we all love it, and how much the fans do love it. It's the squeaky wheels, that stick out. But we go to conventions and we go to panels, we do signings, we sit in Artist Alley. I'm at the Marvel booth a lot, and we prepare for the worst. We do talking points about controversial things that might come up based on things that have been on the internet for a few months before, or difficult character points that we think might come up. And it usually never does. Everyone just wants to talk about the good, how much they love the stories. They make suggestions what we could be doing better. Everybody has a character that they like, that we did something wrong with, that they want to be corrected. And we sit there and we listen. But the love and the passion that comes through in person is a diametrically opposite of what you see, on some of the social media platforms. So
because they're cowards. Because they're cowards. Because they're afraid of confrontation, and because they embrace the idea of anonymity and being able to hide behind a keyboard. They have convictions without courage. They bring their convictions to the keyboard, but when confronted by you face to face, they fall apart because they are afraid to be put into a position of actually defending a position which they feel deep in their heart, but not deeply enough to actually defend it in a person to person basis. It is a chicken shit form of criticism.
Yeah, and it's also
it's paralyzingly embarrassing.
And it's also, we know that that the people complaining on the internet is also the loudest, but they don't represent the biggest percentage, as CB just said, at all. The biggest percentage is not like that. They are not crappy assholes with too much time to spend insulting other people. The real people just enjoys comics and loves them and loves to talk about them. Those are the majority.
Yeah, we get up every day and we love going to work. Howard, look, you're up so early out there, already drawn, up talking comics. I've been up for hours doing this because I love it. David, same thing with you. You were at the end of your day, but you spent the whole day working with creators and and doing something we love. And that's just something that we can't forget. And I hope our creators never forget. And that's what I just want to remind them of. Like, we just love what we do. We just have to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
I'm the luckiest son of a bitch alive. You're right, CB. Exactly.
I agree. Absolutely. Same thing. Artist Frank Galang asks you, CB, what are the most common mistakes that you find in a portfolio review?
Hey, Fran. The most common mistakes are trying to emulate another artist's style too closely. As a comic book fan and as a comic book reader for the decades that I've been doing it, I can go and I can look at an artist's portfolio and instantly say, oh, you were influenced by Joe Madureira, Humberto Ramos, Travis Charest, Carlo Pacheco, and they sit there and they go, how did you know that? And they just, and it's something. It is subconscious in that way, but it's aping another artist's style too closely is one of the biggest. There's a fine line between inspiration and imitation, and that's where the artists really have to find out how to move from being influenced by somebody, because everybody grows up drawing like somebody or influenced by somebody or someone who you saw that you want to try to be more like. It's taking that style and making it your own. That is one of the things that I always give advice on, that I always catch. And the other thing, the other thing is also, and Joe Quesada always used to talk about this too, is when you're doing a story for Marvel or DC or Star Wars, they focus too much on the action and the superhero antics in their samples and don't do enough with the actual the slow scenes, the talking head scenes as we call them, the Peter Parker and Mary Jane on a date scenes. Show us the character interaction. Show us the facial expression. Show us the body language. The superheroes are real human beings, the Hulk aside and certain ones, in tights. If you can draw people being human, you can draw superheroes in the costumes doing the superhuman. And people don't put enough quiet scenes in their samples, I think, would be the two things that I see the most.
Yeah. I remember when I had Joe in Spain when he was still running Auto Nights in Madrid. And I remember as if it was yesterday, 3 people in a row who came with portfolios. Joe asked me to translate there, and it was like only superhero fights, nothing else. And Joe, told me to bring all these 3 people together. Like 5 minutes later, sitting them down and said, "There's no human people doing human interaction here. If I don't have that, this is not enough. I need to see the other side. It's not only about the fights; it's about Peter. We believe in Peter loves Mary Jane, and all that part. So that's something that's really important. People tends to only want to show the fights, and the difficult part, between brackets, is not the fights. It's it's humans being humans, right?
Yeah, scale and perspective are extremely important in drawing those superhero fights. So yeah, they are difficult in their own right in a different way. But drawing hands, drawing eyes, drawing hair, the motions, that takes just as much skill as some of the others as the other aspects of superhero comics do.
How difficult is to draw feet, Howard?
You nice to see environments, actual cities that aren't generic, automobiles, guns that actually shoot bullets as opposed to chiclets. Just stuff. I mean, one of the reasons I like working with the 2 Marks, Mark Waid and Mark Guggenheim, is that they have a real sense of narrative value and understand collaboration. I've never drawn a script by either of those guys that I didn't understand completely how they were calling shots down. And I have 2 file drawers, 4 file drawers behind me, which I never use anymore because the internet is here for that. But I can't get rid of them because you never know. You never know. Because I don't fake anything. I'm not talking about swipes. I'm talking about reference. On my wall over there is the Al Parker page from the Famous Artist books, which lists what you need for your swipe file. Artists today, generally speaking, are too confident in their own memories and in their own skill sets to acknowledge the fact that a world exists outside of their imagination. It's important to basically get past the generic and get to this, both visually and narratively.
What you just mentioned about generic is something that I've seen a lot, and which is with the advent, in brackets, of the digital world, of the digital, drawing digitally. I keep repeating to artists that building is nice to SketchUp form, but that's not a real building. I don't see blinders. I don't see there's been rain and pollution. I need to see that building is real, or those windows are real, and I just see generic forms that are taken from a computer.
It's a spine, it's a skeleton, it's a template. You have to build on top. Years ago when I did a 5-issue series for reasons which I have no idea why anybody would want to publish this, for Marvel, of the Phantom Eagle with Garth Ennis, and Garth, like me, writes the entire series before he delivers the first one, which the way to do it because you know what you're doing. And I called him and I said, you need to give me a complete list of every single airplane that exists in this 5-issue narrative. He gave me that list. I then bought CGI models of every one of those airplanes, none of which were usable for actual finishing purposes, but gave an armature, a skeleton shape that could be done. I printed them out in all their various angles, traced them off, and then redrew on top of them, using it as a rough drawing. That's why try drawing a biplane with that shit. It is just it is a perfect tool, but it is an underdrawing tool. It is not a finishing tool. It leaves you with the generic as opposed to the specific.
I've only got a few more minutes, unfortunately, but one of the things we haven't talked about
yet. Have jobs, David.
Don't worry, we'll finish this question and then we'll talk about food to finish.
That was where I was going. Speaking of, we haven't talked about food, and one of the things about being generic is generic food in comics always kills me. I know that's a
same thing.
Small thing.
We're talking to a guy who included recipes in his comic book, so believe me, I can dig it.
I was reading a comic recently, and this is just how my mind works and how just nitpicky I get. There was a character talking about, I'm glad to be back in New York because I can get an actual real pastrami sandwich. And I looked at the sandwich the artist had drew, and it was almost like a Subway sandwich. And I was like, you don't eat pastrami like that. Pastrami's on rye, cut in half. It should be a triangle.
And at least in a single unit the size of your head. What are you talking about?
Okay, what is the food before CB needs to leave? What is the food you miss the most from your travels around the world?
Oh boy, and the list could go on for me. You know,
Okay, let me ask you. Let me ask you this way: what is the food you miss the most today?
the food, the three things I miss most, and if I just get there is the three play. It's the first time in 30 years I haven't been back to Japan in over a year. So not only do I miss my mother-in-law's home cooking, but I miss Tokyo. I miss some of my favorite restaurants. I miss just the being able to go and get a good yakitori or a good okonomiyaki. Dying to get back to Mexico City soon, or anywhere in Mexico. We were in Oaxaca and Merida right before the pandemic, and just Mexican food, bar none, is some of my favorite on the planet. And then David, and I'm not just playing to the crowd here, but to get back to Spain, I miss Spain dearly, be it, you know, Barcelona or Madrid. Someday I'm going to get up to Galicia, but just, you know, we found a really good Spanish restaurant here. Haven't tried the one you recommended yet, but went back to Haizea. Had some wonderful pulpo, some octopus, just had some fantastic pinchos, and just really want to get back to Spain to just experience just the tapas culture alone. Just to go on a tapas crawl is something I'm dying to do. So
yeah, Howard.
For me, in Spain, it's fabada, always fabada and cachopo, jamonerías. You know, and in Germany, it's Mauthausen. Because the idea of dying for a giant ravioli that's deep fried in Germany is a way to go, you know. And explicitly, and I mean, CB, you can feel jealous of me. I live in a town with the best restaurant in town is a hole in the wall dive named Cuernavaca, run by a guy who comes from Mexico City, who it is the best taqueria I've ever been to in my life. He spent more money on his sign than he did on the interior decoration of the place. It would fuck you up. Trust me. When DC moved out west, everybody came up for a pilgrimage up to here, and the fortachon that he serves, his version of what is pasta es fajitas, his chili rellenos, it is just staggering. Trust me on this. But yes, Mexico City, the quality of the food at Cuernavaca is on a par with the best taquerias I've ever been to in Mexico City. But for me, eating in the world is all about Spain. It is completely Spanish. It used to be Italian, but it is completely Spanish. I mean, Asturias, Gijón, Oviedo, and Avilés, jamonerías, y manchego, cachopo. Es comidas perfecto en todo el mundo. You know.
I need to get you both to Galicia sooner than later.
Hey, David, can I answer one question here that just came up?
Yeah, I was going to go with that. Go.
Carolina said people always ask for tips on inside pages, but what about covers? And I think a lot of the same rules apply. You know, covers, the best covers, when you look back at your favorite comic covers, or when I look back at my favorite comic covers, they told a story. It's an art form we lost, and Marvel was a part of this, and I, you know, take part of the blame for it, you know, about 20 years ago, where just a lot of them became pinup covers, and those have always been there, but we moved away from storytelling covers for certain reasons. And now we've been really trying to recapture that magic and remind people to go back. These covers should tell a story, and it's a fine line to walk because you want to tease what's going on inside. You don't want to give anything away. You don't want to get spoilers, but you want to come up with an image that tells a story that pulls people in. A cover should really be page one of the comic in many ways because that's its job. Mm-hmm. And yeah, sometimes a great shot of Wonder Woman or you know, the Scarlet Witch will do that. And there's not saying there's anything wrong with that because there are beautiful covers that are like that. But every cover should in some way contain some element that tells a story that makes the reader want to know more and pick that book up off the shelf. Mm-hmm. Howard,
I categorically disagree. Mm-hmm. I think that the idea of the cover as synopsis is a mistake. I think when you look at a guy like Adam Hughes, who was mistaken for a pinup artist, who was actually an extraordinary draftsman who's got an idea, but more specifically, Dave Johnson, who is the best cover artist comics has had since Kurtzman. It's not so much a story, and again, I know what you're going for, CB, but it's not so much a story, but a graphic idea that is attractive. It's for me. You say page one of the book. For me, it's a poster. I abjure the pinup idea. That's not what I'm talking about. But Dave's work is so rife with ideas and cleverness and wit, as is Adam's. The guys who imitate Adam do not have that wit. But you look at what Kurtzman did at EC, and you look at, for me, the best comic book covers ever made were the covers that Reed Crandall did for the Black Hawk and military books back during the Second World War. They are so packed with ideas. They are so smart and clever. If you're not familiar with that stuff, CB, take a look at it.
I'm making a note.
It will blow you away. They are clever. They are funny. and he steals from everywhere. You know, he just really does. He's a guy who's due for a re-examination and a reorientation as one of the giants of the field. But for me, a cover should be an idea visualized, not a story, but an idea, one idea. That's why I the Vertigo line of comics always pissed me off because it was just totally too abstract and too obscure for me. But that's just me.
I agree with you about Adam, and I don't know if you've seen him. He's been doing Black Widow's cover for us, and everyone he experiments, we tell him, he even does the logo himself, the placement and everything, and what he's doing is pulling people in. Yep.
He's so smart and so pissed off.
Howard, what's the most effective way to study other artists? Dom Gomez asks you.
In what sense? How do you mean study?
I don't know. Dom, please clarify. Okay, so while he clarifies, my last one, CB, the moment you need to leave, just say it, okay?
Yeah, I'm really going to have to go now, David and Howard. I'm sorry. It was great talking to you both. Thank you for everyone who joined. Wonderful to see everybody. David, congratulations again on the year. Hopefully, you know, there's another year. And hopefully you'll be able to do this in person when we can all start traveling and all this, you know, COVID is behind us. So.
We'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it. Big hugs to you, Sumi. Like
Thanks.
I can
Yep.
Stay healthy.
There, you too, Howard. See you. Take care.
So Dom's question.
Dom's question, he just clarifies, says, like, if I were to study David Finch, how could I get something out of it for my own work?
I find the work you're talking about. I mean, I tend to look at masters as opposed to guys who do work that is momentarily appealing. You know, it's hard for me to think of guys like, you know, I mean, I look at the modern guys whose work I admire and study are people like Lionel Yu, Eduardo Riso. For the most part, you know, it's a matter of dissecting and figuring out. I mean, I remember the experience I had when I finally figured out what Robert Fawcett was doing visually in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I look at a lot of illustrators, but the work that I look at these days has very little to do with what the narrative is about, what the characters are about. It doesn't interest me. The guys I look at old masters. I look at Alex Toth. I look at Bernard Kriegstein. I look at Harvey Kurtzman. I look at Ferdinand Tacconi. I look at Carlos Jimenez.
Let's just say what you're looking at to straighten his question. You're looking at a Carlos Jimenez page or a Bernie Kriegstein.
Right.
What means is, what's the most effective way to study, those masters' pages and try to incorporate them into your own work?
Separate yourself from what the story is about and look instead about how the story is told.
Yeah. By the end of the day, it's not also. Greg Capullo told me a great phrase a couple months ago when he was here. He said, sometimes, working, studying means that you have such a big, stash that you don't even know about in your work,
right,
but also in your head, that you're working on a page and somebody, like 3 years later is going to tell you, oh, that looks like it had influence from whoever. And you're like, I didn't notice. I just have so many stuff in my head. And it just goes to the page, right?
Here's the best way to think about it. When I hear people talking about being influenced by Alex Toth, who I regard as the best comic book artist American comics ever had, being influenced by Alex Toth is not drawing like Alex Toth. Being influenced by Alex Toth is understanding the narrative, the design system that he applied to narrative and applying it to your own work, not drawing the way Alex drew. I mean, Bill Sienkiewicz started his career imitating Neil Adams. Phil Jimenez started his career imitating George Perez. But they've gone on to become different men. And the influence is profound because it's both. There's a tremendous love attached to the imitation, but there's also an envy and a resentment that they got there first. And once you get past the resentment and the envy and become someone else, that's where the joy begins. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
David, I gotta go.
Yep. I just wanted to finish this. I just wanted to finish that question. Thank you.
Give my love to Paloma, to Erin. With luck, we'll see you soon. I cannot wait to sit across from you on a table and piss and moan about other people. You have no idea how I miss it. So
I'll see you very soon. Let's hope so. In the shadows of your mind, but we'll make it happen. As soon as this crap is sober and dealt with.
I mean, if I believe in God, I'd pray, but I don't. So let's just hope.
Yeah. Let's keep it a hope. And I don't believe either. So believe in science. That's what we have. Science.
That's it.
Science will fix this shit. That's the thing.
All right, a big consent. My best at home, and we'll see you soon. I'm out.
Okay.
Later, guys.
Take care, my friend. Same to you. Bye. And to all of you, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Happy New Year. No, it's been a year. Ha sido un año. No sé cuánto vamos a durar. Probablemente hasta el 199, que será hasta final de mayo. Probably until end of May, which will be episode 199. If I don't have, si no tengo a quien quiero para el 200, if I don't have one for 200, I will stop right there. That will be the last episode. Ese será el último episodio si no consigo a quien quiero para el 200. Ya está. Y son solo 3 opciones que son muy fáciles saber. It's only 3 options that is very easy to know. Anyway, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. And take care. Bye bye.